Michael stood silently in the dim light of the living room, the soft glow from the old wooden table casting long shadows. He hadn't moved an inch, his gaze fixed on the phone in his hand. 3 days had passed since he discovered the cryptic messages and late-night calls. 3 days without sleep, without food, unable to tear his eyes away from the photos and texts. Every time he scrolled through them, his heart clenched in pain, yet he couldn't let go. Sophia, the woman he had loved, was somewhere in this house, but it felt as if she had long since drifted away. He had once believed their love was unbreakable, but now, all that remained was coldness and an expansive silence filled with unspoken questions. She had changed, and he knew. The moment he hired the private investigator, everything he needed to know had been laid bare. They had dinner together, hand in hand, stealing embraces in shadowy corners. She told him she loved him, that she hadn't changed, but those messages told a different story. Michael sighed, trying to push his anger out of his mind. He knew the truth was something he had to face. But why did it have to be this truth? He couldn't accept it. The door to the living room creaked open, and Sophia stepped inside, her smile as bright as ever. But Michael immediately sensed something was off in the way she moved. She seemed to be hiding something. That feeling, that all too familiar sense from the past few months when she had grown distant, had become a mystery. Sophia saw him standing there, silent, no greeting, no smile. She paused, as if sensing the storm about to hit. "I'm back," she said, her voice gentle, as if nothing were wrong. Michael didn't respond, remaining silent. He could do nothing but wait until she couldn't keep up the charade any longer. Finally, Sophia looked at him, her eyes meeting his sharp gaze, and in that moment, she realized that today would not be like any other. "Michael, are you okay?" Sophia asked, but her tone lacked the concern it once had. She knew this question was only the beginning of a staged conversation. "You don't have to pretend anymore, Sophia," Michael said, his voice dropping low. "I know everything." A chilling silence engulfed the room. Sophia didn't move, her eyes confused, as if she couldn't grasp what she had just heard. They both knew that this moment would decide everything. But the story wasn't over. It had only just begun. Michael couldn't shake the whirlwind of thoughts in his head. When Sophia's eyes met his, everything seemed to blur. But there was one thing he couldn't ignore: the searing pain in his chest. It felt just like the first time, when he loved her, but now it was an undeniable ache. He remembered the first time they met. Sophia, a beautiful and strong woman, with a rising career and an inner glow that captivated everyone. Michael, at that time, was just a man stepping into married life, full of hope and belief. He had thought he had found true love in Sophia, someone he felt was his perfect match, his ideal partner in life. Those early days they spent together were filled with joy, afternoons strolling the streets, endless conversations about life, about dreams. They shared secrets, things Michael had never felt able to reveal to anyone else. Everything seemed perfect. Their dating months passed in a blur, never wanting to be apart, even for a moment. Michael always knew that Sophia was someone he could trust, a loving and intelligent partner. And then, after some time, they decided to marry. Their love story was a testament to perfection, at least in the eyes of those around them. But as they entered married life, everything started to change. The romantic evenings they once shared slowly turned into distant moments, their conversations becoming brief and infrequent. She was always busy with work, leaving no time for the sweet dates or movie nights they used to enjoy together. Michael did everything he could to keep their love fresh, but it seemed that Sophia was slowly pulling away from him. There were moments when Michael wondered if their marriage could truly last. He couldn't understand why everything had changed. He tried to find ways to draw her closer, but his efforts only seemed to push her further away. She was drifting, and all he could do was torture himself with questions. Long nights in the cold room, wondering if he had enough love left to hold on to a wife who seemed no longer to see him. It was during these moments of doubt that David entered the picture. Michael had never imagined that Sophia's colleague would be the one to impact their marriage. David was charismatic, intelligent, and had a way of making everyone feel special. Michael had met him a few times at company gatherings, but he never suspected David would be the one to change everything. Sophia always spoke highly of David, and Michael thought little of it, trusting his wife implicitly. But then, signs started appearing. Strange calls, unclear messages that Sophia always hurried to delete when he got too close. The feeling in Michael grew stronger, as if something was terribly wrong. He began to track her, trying to learn everything she was doing. The meetings she claimed were just work-related. But the painful truth that he uncovered only deepened his suspicion, and eventually, he was forced to confront what he didn't want to believe. Over the past few months, Michael had done everything he could to save their marriage. He had hoped that the struggles would pass, that everything would return to the way it was. But now all those hopes seemed to crumble. Sophia had changed, and he could no longer live in a relationship where he no longer felt loved or respected. Now, looking at Sophia, Michael realized that the love he had once given her, the love he had desperately tried to preserve for all these years, was now nothing more than a fading memory. He couldn't go back to how things were, couldn't continue pretending like nothing had happened. This feeling, this truth, was too painful to deny. It felt as if time had stopped when he looked at Sophia, the woman he had once loved more than himself. But now, all that remained was a hollow facade, a relationship full of insecurity and doubt. He didn't know what to say, didn't know where to begin when the truth he couldn't escape had finally come to light. But there was one thing he couldn't deny. Sophia had changed, and that change had likely begun a long time ago. As he started noticing the small shifts in Sophia's behavior, he couldn't help but feel uneasy. She began coming home later, taking sudden business trips, working late without clear reasons. She started changing her eating habits, paying more attention to her appearance, and new clothes kept appearing in her wardrobe, clothes he couldn't remember her buying. These subtle signs were no longer just his suspicions. They were the slow unraveling of the truth. One evening, when Sophia went out with friends, Michael could no longer bear it. He decided to check her phone. At first, it was just a moment of curiosity. But when he saw the messages with David, his heart shattered. Affectionate words, random calls with no clear reason, and most telling of all, the conversations Sophia would quickly delete when she thought he wasn't paying attention. That was the moment he realized. Their relationship had gone too far, no longer just innocent work chats. His suspicion was confirmed when he overheard stories about private meetings that Sophia had mentioned with David. What started as casual lunches soon evolved into something much more. The lingering glances, the accidental touches during meals, the looks of longing that Michael hadn't seen. All of that had slowly created a path that Michael hadn't anticipated. One day, when Sophia received a message from David and hastily deleted it, Michael decided to do something he never thought he'd have to. He hired a private investigator. He could no longer live in the haze of uncertainty, watching everything fall apart without doing anything. After a few days of surveillance, the investigator brought back photos, undeniable evidence. Photos of Sophia and David at private lunches, hurried hugs after work, moments when they kissed in the shadows. Each photo felt like a knife to his heart, each one making it harder to breathe. Michael didn't want to face this truth, but he couldn't avoid it. A part of him still wanted to believe there was a reasonable explanation. But another part of him, the part that had seen enough signs of betrayal, forced him to confront it. The bitterness, anger, and disappointment made it impossible to stay standing. He decided to confront her. There was nothing left to hide. This was the moment when everything seemed to stop. He had invited Sophia home early that day, preparing dinner, but not to make peace. It was to discuss the truth. He set the table, poured wine into 2 glasses, but said nothing when she walked in. Sophia saw him sitting there, his eyes no longer soft with affection, but cold and distant. She sat down across from him, gently asking, "Michael, what's wrong?" He looked at her, unable to hold back the anger and hurt that was rising within him. "I know everything, Sophia," he said, his voice dropping low. "I know about David, the messages, the meetings. You can't lie to me anymore." Sophia froze, her eyes widening, a flicker of panic in her gaze. She couldn't speak, couldn't explain anymore. Everything had been laid bare. You don't understand, Sophia began. But Michael cut her off. Understand what? You've betrayed me, you've had an affair with him. Don't think I'll still be your man after everything you've done. These words hit Sophia like a slap to the face. She lowered her head, unable to say anything, just staring at the untouched plates on the table, a testament to everything that had fallen apart. That was when Michael knew, no matter how much it hurt, he had to end this relationship. The betrayal was too great to forgive. And in this silent room, he felt that everything had ended. There was no turning back. Michael looked at Sophia, his heart heavy with anger and disappointment. But what struck him most was her silence. She didn't cry, didn't beg, didn't offer any explanations. All that remained was a suffocating space, where the wounds in his heart continued to bleed. Sophia sat motionless, her hands placed on the table, her fingers nervously caressing the wine glass as if seeking comfort from it. She couldn't bring herself to look him in the eyes, afraid to face the deep disappointment she knew she had caused. Tears streamed down her face, but they weren't from regret. They were because she didn't know what to do next. She had gone too far to turn back. How do you plan to explain this? Michael's voice broke the silence, filled with a bitter sorrow. Or will you tell me that everything I've seen is just a misunderstanding? Sophia lowered her head, unable to respond. She knew there was nothing she could say to justify what she had done. The photos, the messages, the secret meetings. All the evidence reflected the betrayal she couldn't hide. Michael took a deep breath, trying to remain calm, but the rage inside him was uncontrollable. He stood up, walked over to Sophia, and stared at her. I can't live in this lie, Sophia. Do you understand? Everything you've done. It's unforgivable. Sophia burst into tears, her sobs uncontrollable. She couldn't take it anymore, couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay. She had once thought she could keep two worlds alive, that her love for Michael and her attraction to David could coexist. But now she understood she had been wrong. Everything had ended a long time ago.
Michael, I'm sorry.
I was wrong. I don't know what to do. Sophia's voice choked in her throat. Michael didn't respond. He turned away and sat back down in his chair. Each word of her apology was like a knife to his heart. He didn't need her apology. He had heard too many promises and apologies over the course of their marriage, only for nothing to ever change. He was tired, so tired of empty promises that were never followed through. You think you can just get my trust back so easily? No matter how many times you apologize, you can't change the truth. David, has had you for a long time, hasn't he? Michael's voice was cold, each word cutting like a sharp blade. You've had him in your mind for so long, and now, you think that a simple apology can make everything go back to the way it was. Sophia looked into his eyes, her own filled with regret. You're the only one I love, Michael. I know I was wrong, but I didn't realize it until it was too late. He was just a moment of weakness. I can't let this destroy everything. I can't. Michael cut her off, a bitter laugh escaping from his throat. You don't get it, Sophia. You don't understand the pain you've caused me. A moment of weakness? How long have you been living in lies? Did you think you could live in a world with two faces forever? No, you made your choice. And now, there's no place for you in my life anymore. Sophia stood up, her hands trembling as she tried to move toward him. Michael, please don't leave me. I love you. I can't live without you. But Michael stood up, walked out of the room without looking back. He felt nothing for her words anymore. He was too tired, too hurt to continue with someone who no longer deserved him. He walked out, leaving Sophia standing still in the dark of the room, in an endless void of despair. A sense of emptiness enveloped Sophia as she realized she had lost everything. Not only Michael's love, but herself as well. She had lied. She had hurt the only person who had ever truly loved her. And now, everything had crumbled completely. Nothing could salvage this relationship anymore. It was too late for her to realize that betrayal could never be forgiven. In the absolute silence, only Sophia's tears remained, and the wounds in both their hearts that neither could heal. Michael didn't turn back, and his footsteps echoed in the stillness of the house. He couldn't bear it any longer, couldn't continue living in a marriage that was only filled with lies and betrayal. The long, lonely nights, the invisible distances between them, had now become walls that could never be broken. Sophia stood alone in the room, her tears still falling, but she no longer had the strength to call his name. She had no more words to justify herself, no more ways to convince him that everything would be okay. Her apologies and promises had become meaningless. She had lost everything. The next day, Michael returned with a coldness he never thought he could possess. He had completed the divorce papers and brought them to Sophia, papers that she didn't want to see. She sat in the living room, offering no resistance, merely accepting the end in silence. Any explanations were now meaningless. She couldn't fight for it anymore, and he no longer had the strength to try. "You'll have to sign here," Michael said, his voice as firm as stone. "It's over, Sophia." She looked at the paper, her hands trembling as she picked up the pen to sign her name. She felt nothing but emptiness and pain. There was no sympathy, no regret, only an overwhelming sense of loss. He could no longer love her, and she couldn't forgive herself. After signing, Sophia stood up, wanting to say something, but words failed her. Michael looked at her one last time, his gaze cold and distant, as if she was no longer the person he once loved. He needed no further explanation. Turning away, he walked out of the house that he had once called home, but now it no longer felt like a place for him. The door closed behind Michael, leaving Sophia alone in the empty room. She had no choice but to face the painful truth that she had lost everything. She had destroyed the love Michael had for her, and now nothing could heal the wounds. As the days passed, both Michael and Sophia found their separate paths. Michael reclaimed himself after the storm, rebuilding his life from the shattered pieces of a broken marriage. He learned to love himself again, finding joy in work and new relationships around him. His life slowly returned to peace, though the scars remained in his heart. As for Sophia, she faced a loneliness that could never be erased. Each night, she woke with thoughts of what she had lost. She blamed herself, wondering why she had let everything go so far, why she hadn't held on to the love when she still had the chance. But no matter how much regret she carried, she knew she could never go back, and she had to accept the truth, that sometimes mistakes are unforgivable. Finally, one autumn afternoon, Michael ran into Sophia on the street by chance. They stood silently, looking at each other, no words needed. Their gaze, though no longer filled with love, still held a deep understanding of each other's past. Sophia smiled gently, then turned and walked away, leaving Michael standing, lost in his thoughts. They were no longer each other's, but each of them had begun a new chapter in their lives. And so, the story ended in silence, without any dramatic calls or perfect resolutions. It was merely an ending, but also the beginning of something new for both. Though love may end, life must go on.